family. And I didn't want people to go away with thinking that they can just feed table food and that would be okay. Good.
No,
Okay.
and I would love to get into the proper diet, because there's the kibble and there's the thought, even from the animal lovers, saying, oh, just by buying the expensive food, you're only going to save like 2 years of the puppy's life. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, how can you have that mindset? And then you have the people that just feed them off the table and thinking they're giving their dog some love. But I wanted to just touch and echo your story about your daughter, because I rode horses when I was younger, and they are looking out for you as much as you're looking out for them. I rode horses and I fell off the horse, and I would have been stompled if the horse wasn't looking out for me. I literally was laying on my back on the ground, looking straight up, and the horse had his arms out, and I was in between, and he was just looking down at me, waiting for me to patiently get out from underneath her. And she was my best friend when I was younger. And then now my two puppies, very different personalities, but they're so sensitive to you. They care for you. They respond to supplements, and I'll get into that later at the end on the supplements that I give my pups. But also I do a lot of frequency medicine, and I use a machine called the biocharger. Well, my dogs will actually come sit with me as I'm doing a treatment because they feel it. Sure. They're so much more sensitive to things than we are. But back to the diet. It is so important because, like you said, forget the stem cells and the peptides and all of this fun stuff if you're not dealing with the basics. And I tell the people that as well. If you're not sleeping and you're not handling your stress and you're not eating a clean diet and taking, it's not just about what you're taking in, but it's about what you're eliminating.
Yes.
All of the other stuff means nothing. Supplements are supplemental, right?
Yeah.
They're supplemental to the foundation. So let's get into the diet and what is proper, because organic vegetables and rice might not be right for your pup.
No, the pet food industry was actually birthed from the waste products of human processing. So we live in a world where we want to monetize everything that we have. And so when we started processing our food, there was a lot of waste products. And so they would take these foods, these rendered foods, and they were not fit for human consumption. And then they would heat it to high temperatures. And then, of course, now it's nutritionally dead. And then they would add back what they considered to be nutrition. And a lot of it was synthetic because it had to be stable in that kind of a form. And then they extruded it into a kibble and stuck it together. Back in the day was using corn and grains. And then when we started going grain free, because we were seeing all this disease, then they went into substituting the grains for carbohydrates like potato starch and tapioca. But all of that is enzymatically dead. There's no nutrition truly in there except what is added back in. So what I help people to do is go back to our roots of using common sense. I think we've really gone very far away from common sense. How do we know what is a species appropriate diet? What do animals in the wild eat? And we have privy to that because we can watch National Geographic. I grew up with Marlene Perkins, in the wild kingdom. So we watched what animals eat in the wild. We certainly can understand that. And our dogs are carnivores. We call them scavenger carnivores because they have adapted to man's waste a little bit more than cats have. Cats are obligate carnivores. They literally have no dietary requirement for carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. Dogs and cats do not have amylase in their saliva. That's the enzyme that breaks down carbohydrates. Nor do they chew their food. Anybody who's ever watched their healthy pet eat, they just scarf it, gobble it, 1 or 2 bites, and it's down the hatch. They don't chew their food. Well, the reason we are able to eat carbohydrates is because we're supposed to chew our food thoroughly to a pancake batter. And when we do that, we release this amylase in our saliva, which begins the predigestion of carbohydrates. So just right there, we see a massive difference in how they were designed to eat from how we were designed to eat. So in simplistic terms, they were designed to eat the animal that they killed in the state that they killed it in. They got their prebiotic and probiotics from the intestinal tract, because after they killed that animal, they would have degutted it. Not pretty to think about, but it's nature. And then they would have pulled the intestines out, tearing some of it, getting that effluent in their mouth. And then they would have searched for the organ meat, which was premier. And then they would have eaten cartilage and bones, and they would have had muscle meat and fat, and the fur was your indigestible fiber. So they got a balanced diet, and this is all assuming that that animal that they killed and ate was out roaming on free range pastures as well. But over the years, we have become so much more industrialized that the meats that we're feeding our animals and eating ourselves are now raised in feedlots. They're not free range, grass fed, grass finished. So it's a whole different market. Yeah. And why that's important is because carnivores, this is very important, guys. Carnivores get their vitamin D, like a dog, their vitamin D from their protein source. Herbivores get their vitamin D from the sun. So that herbivore has to be in the sun to be able to develop enough vitamin D in their meat so that when the carnivore eats that meat, they actually get sufficient vitamin D. We're omnivores. We do both. We get vitamin D from our protein, and we get vitamin D from the sun. And it's just kind of interesting that most people are light deficient. They're not going outside in the full spectrum of sunlight during the day. And they're eating foods that are not raised sustainably. They're not grass-fed, grass-finished. So are we surprised that so many people have vitamin D deficiencies? Mm-hmm. And studies in animals have shown that 85% of dogs eating a kibble diet are vitamin D deficient.
Wow.
That is a university study. So yes, we have massive problems going on in our food supply because we've gotten so far away from sustainable living, sustainable eating, and a species appropriate diet.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So
unpack that one.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about the fact that you can't just eat animal protein. Mm-hmm. I say chicken is the dirty bird, the way it's fed, and even organic chicken has been adulterated, and there's amyloid proteins in it that the body can't digest or break down to assimilate into the body. And then you've got the cows, just like you're saying, they're full of, who knows what they're eating. They're not eating their regular diet. So I really try to promote a wild animal protein, bison, elk, venison, lamb, wild fish. And so it goes for our little pups as well, is what you're saying. Are there specific brand names that you like? I mean, is it just a raw food diet? Is that what you're looking for? I mean, there's so many companies out there, and I'll spend what I need to spend on my dogs. And
absolutely,
I do feed them raw food. It's the Primal brand, and maybe that's not even good enough.
So let me define. Of course, I have a raw food company, and when I started, there were 3 raw food companies on the market, and neither one of the other 2 would maintain the quality of their product, which is why I ended up creating my own company. And when I say that, I contacted both companies and I said, would you make a truly species appropriate organic diet with no synthetic vitamins and no fillers and all grass-fed, grass-finished proteins? And both of them said no. In fact, one of them went on to develop a raw coated kibble because the company had been sold, new CEO, and they were just going after market dollars. So what I'm going to describe is my diet that I created, and you want to have that or better. So there needs to be a balance of meat, fat, bone, and organ meat in the diet. And the meat has to be grass-fed, grass-finished, or free range. So if we're talking about birds, we're going to be talking about free range chicken, that they're not fed a genetically modified corn diet. Same thing with the cattle. And it's really hard to find producers that do that. But who produces my product is the largest producer of grass-fed, grass-finished, and free-range meats in the entire United States.
Great.
So very serendipitous how we were put together. But the second problem that we have is when diets are called complete and balanced, which according to AFCO standards, you have to produce a diet and have it on the claim that it's complete and balanced, which means they have to add in the vitamins, minerals, and fatty acids to balance the diet, because they already knew that our wild food or our homemade foods are going to be deficient, because if the soil is deficient in those minerals, then whoever's eating that is going to be deficient, and that just continues to snowball. So we know our food, because our farming practices are not sustainable, are going to be deficient. So knowing this, they made this standard that you have to add this in. Well, I wasn't going to add synthetic junk into my diet. So I thought, how do I get around that? And so what I did is I separated my macronutrients from my micronutrients. So I separated the meat, fat, bone, and organ meat, which is your macronutrients, which of course has some nutrition in it. It's not devoid. I mean, those cows were out in these beautifully kept green pastures out in Missouri. So they're not sprayed with any hormones or chemicals. They're fed a natural diet. And with all that, we don't know what the quality of the grasses are. So we don't know what they're deficient in: zinc, copper, etc. So the second thing I did is I created an essential nutrient line. And essential nutrients are those nutrients that the body cannot manufacture in sufficient quantities for the body. Then you can look them up online. The dogs are a little bit different than the cats, and they're a little bit different than humans by a few amino acids and a few things. So the essential vitamins, the essential minerals, the essential fatty acids, and the essential amino acids. So that became my core. We sell that separately. And the beauty of that, thank you to the universe for giving me the inspiration, was that we can now dose the nutrition based on that animal's body weight and metabolic needs. Because when you're taking a can of food or even a raw diet from another manufacturer, not like those nutrients are equally dispersed in there. So what if you have a 10-pound Chihuahua versus a 120-pound Great Dane? They're eating the same diet, but different quantities. How do you know how much they're actually getting? And so for me, because I'm dealing with so many animals with chronic degenerative diseases, I had to know that I was feeding therapeutic levels. I couldn't afford deficiencies, because all disease comes from three things: deficiencies of essential nutrients, an overload of toxins that the body can't get rid of. Usually it's a combination, and mitochondrial dysfunction.
Imagine that. It's the same as us.
I do add a fourth one, which is the emotional component, trapped emotions, but another whole conversation. Let's just stick with the top three right now, because if people can dial in those top three, number four is a piece of cake. So understanding that